When Thomas Lord, a self-made wine merchant from Yorkshire, was asked to found a cricket club in Marylebone in the late 18th century, he founded, without knowing it, a great deal more than a cricket club. He defined an area of the English personality. Is it possible to conceive of such a game having evolved, being shaped, anywhere other than in England during the 18th century? Rural England. England in the heyday of the country house and the country gentleman. Cricket is a historical portrait of the Englishman at leisure, and Lord's is his portrait gallery. This is the Cricket Memorial Gallery, opened behind the pavilion in 1953. And unlike the pavilion where we've just been, it's open to the public. The first pictorial records we have date from the first half of the 18th century. Here's a painting by Francis Hayman, who, by the way, was one of the founders of the Royal Academy, showing the game in progress on the artillery ground in 1743. The man who's wicketkeeper, a rather grotesque figure, is said to be the artist Hogarth, who was a friend of Hayman's. They're delightful, these early cricket pictures. The game is part of the landscape, the picturesque element in the landscape. And when you look at these paintings, you don't think how dramatic or who's winning. You think of relaxing after a week's work with a half-hearted clap now and again, and the prospect of a beer or two when stumps are drawn. It's thoroughly rural, Arcadian. Football belongs to industrial England, cricket to a kind of ideal England before the Industrial Revolution. And that's a great deal of its charm, a townsman's nostalgia for country life, in which nothing is more taxing than a gentle game with a bat and ball till the sun goes down. And yet, cricket developed into a highly complex game, with its own rules, codes of etiquette, traditions, even its own uniform. In fact, in the 19th century, the game underwent a very radical change, and the reason it did so was that the people who played it started to take it very seriously indeed. This is Rowlandson's view of a women's cricket match in 1811, and it wasn't at all how the bigwigs of the game now looked at it. To them, cricket had become more than a game. It had acquired moral status. It had become a virtue. How about this painting? It's called The Toss for Innings, but it's not about cricket at all. It's about fair play. Fair play, play a straight bat, keep your end up, play the game, keep your eye on the ball, we're on a good wicket. Well played. How's that? It's extraordinary how often in English we've defined codes of human behaviour in cricketing terms, far more than any other sport. In Victorian England, cricket came to enshrine the values most cherished by the English gentleman. They were values which the young were expected to acquire early and later to carry with them to the outposts of the empire. This is a painting called The Winner of the Match. He who wins must be modest at all times, and notice he's never the big bully. The losers are generous in defeat, and the family impartial but appreciative. The game's the thing. Goodness, it's all there. Cricket had come to be considered something of a training ground for life. It was a social attribute, like dancing or being amusing at dinner. To be good at it mattered. The public schools took it up earnestly. So did the old universities and the armed forces. Cricket proceeded to flower wherever the British flag was planted. Australia, New Zealand, West Indies, India, South Africa, Fiji, even the polar regions. The leaders of cricket and the nation were, of course, gentlemen, often the aristocracy. Lord Harris was a pillar of Lords and of cricket in the early part of this century. He was also Under-Secretary of State for War, appropriately enough, and Harris was followed as MCC Treasurer by Lord Hawke. These are the founders of a famous club called Izingery in 1845. It still exists. On the right is the Earl of Bessborough. On the left, Sir Spencer, Cecil, Brabazon, Ponsonby-Fane, PC, Surrey and the Gentleman, Treasurer to MCC. Izingery actually means the gypsies. These are all club ties. Gainsborough Britannia Cricket Club, Free Foresters, Hambledon Cricket Club, Eton Ramblers, Alexandria Cricket Club, Repton Pilgrims Cricket Club. How it all smacks of an old colonial England, with its roots in Oxbridge and the public schools and loyalties aroused by junior house matches. This is the Izingery tie. Its colours, I'm told, symbolise from darkness through fire into light. You know, with sentiments like that, you would be pretty hard put to it to guess that was a cricket club. As cricket developed from a country pastime into a spectacle of valour and rivalry, so it gathered its own folklore. Each of these bats has a dozen legends. This one, Jessop's bat. He scored 104 against Australia in 75 minutes. Still the fastest English Test century. And this ball, off this ball, W.G. Grace scored his 100th century in first-class cricket. Then there's a sparrow killed by a ball at Lord's, and W.G. Grace's snuff box. And most of all, there are the Ashes, for which England and Australia have fought symbolically since 1882. They are supposed to be the ashes of English cricket, which were buried some months earlier when Australia had beaten England in a test match for the first time in this country. And to many an old-timer, it seemed as though the flower of England, including W.G. Grace, had been crushed by a bunch of convicts. Here's the first ever overseas touring team in 1859, to America of all places. Apparently they had a pretty rough time of it though, seasick the whole way, in further trouble when they got there. Then the first team to Australia. They went out in Brunel's great iron steamship, the Great Britain, in 1861. 8 years later, the Australians came here for the first time. But they were all Aborigines, and they entertained the crowds with boomerang displays in the intervals between play. Lord's is haunted by the legendary figures of cricket. Albert Trott, the only man to strike a ball clean over the Lord's Pavilion. C.B. Fry, first-class degree and triple blue at Oxford, played for England at 3 sports, was thought such a fine chap he was once offered the throne of Albania, which naturally he refused. Ranjit Singh, the first great coloured cricketer to play for England, but from the top draw, of course. Afterwards, he became His Highness the Yam Sahib of Nawanaga. And of course, Dr. W.G. Grace. His ghost is everywhere at Lord's. When he went out to bat for England, so I'm told, the gentlemen's clubs in St. James's emptied. He was reckoned to be the highest paid amateur of them all. Max Beerbohm shows him holding his benefit cheque while one of his patients is taken off to the mortuary. And of course, royalty came to Lord's. The Prince of Wales came to watch Grace bat against Australia. Lily Langtry, the royal mistress, discreetly looks away. What another world. A sequence of high Edwardian summers. 1914 was the centenary of the first match to be played at Lord's, and there was a dinner. Lord Hawke proposed the toast in which he referred to Lord's as the Parliament House of cricket. W.G. Grace also spoke. He was by now the grand old man. But he was less sanguine about the future of the game, and when a few months later the First World War broke out, he wrote to the Times suggesting that the game be suspended and all those young men put away their white flannels and join up and fight. By 1915, Grace himself was dead. In cricket too, the First World War ended an era. After the war, Lord's managed to look the same, but it was a veneer. There had once been 38,000 visitors to an Eton and Harrow match. The post-war generation was trying hard to keep memories alive. The period between the wars belonged to a different kind of hero. He was concerned less with the elegance of the game than with winning it. It was the age of the professional, or at least the age of the cricketer with the outlook of the professional. There was Hobbs and Sutcliffe, Verity, and above all, Bradman. The first man to be knighted for just playing cricket. Bradman never inspired colourful legends like Grace. His folklore was his batting average, 99.9 in all test matches. It makes you wonder how England ever won.
And Verity to Wall. Oh, he's out. That's the end of the match. The players are pulling up the stumps. Wall played very gently, and Patsy Hendren took the catch. And Australia are all out for 118. They're beaten by an innings and 38 runs. The crowd is simply swarming onto the ground from all sides. The players have pulled up the stumps for souvenirs. The Australians are walking back, and the police are trying to keep a line there.
And Lord's today? Well, the national game, like the nation, is on hard times. For an average three-day match, Lord's can look as empty as this. So they've lured sponsors back, which has worked. And how? You'll be lucky to find a seat here for the Gillette Cup final. One-day cricket. Instant entertainment. But is that what cricket's really all about? To me, the appeal of cricket lies in the fearful length of time that it takes to play it. It's not instant. I don't want to see it over in an afternoon. I want it to drag on. I want it to spread over weekends and tea breaks and changes in weather and changes of bowling. But who the hell's going to watch it all that length of time? That is the dilemma. Cricket was a game conceived for men of leisure. And now it's had to adapt to people like me, I suppose, who very often have just about leisure enough to turn on the radio or the television.
He's 96 now in the score. The England total 214 for 2 wickets. Perhaps some of you may not have heard that Hutton was bowled for 0 by Kai, and Parkes also bowled by Kai for 22. Hutton stayed in for 25 minutes and then got a snorter.